If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. Have you ever felt that gnawing emptiness? The sense that no achievement, no relationship, no fleeting moment of happiness is quite enough. It's that quiet ache in your heart that surfaces in the still moments, whispering of a longing that goes beyond the here and now. We carry wounds from our past, a burden of what we have left behind, but sometimes what holds us back most is our fear that what lies ahead may not fulfill our deepest desires. Yet the truth is that the very ache in your soul is a signpost pointing to something far greater. We settle for what is immediately before us: temporary pleasure, the approval of others, the thrill of ambition, not because our desires are too strong, but because they are too weak. It's as though we are content with wandering through a fog, unable to imagine that the dawn could be any brighter. But what if that yearning, that restlessness, is not a sign of lack but a divine reminder that we are destined for so much more? To live as a Christian is not just to see the light of faith as a comfort, but to understand that it transforms the way we view the world and our very purpose in it. Lewis reminds us that love is not just a feeling but a desire for the ultimate good of another, just as God desires your ultimate good. Reflect on this. Do you live like the child making mud pies in the slum, unable to grasp the joy of a holiday by the sea? So often, we are half-hearted, grasping at things that leave us empty, while God offers a greater feast, a deeper love, and an everlasting joy. Forgiveness is a radical act of love that frees both you and others because God has forgiven what seemed unforgivable in you. It's the release from bitterness, the open door to healing, and the journey toward a deeper understanding of who you are meant to be. So, as you navigate this life, know that every joy and every sorrow, every broken moment and every triumph is woven into a story much larger than you can imagine. It's a call to rediscover that childlike wonder, to find joy in God's promises, and to grow beyond the immediate to see the eternal. There are indeed far better things ahead than anything we leave behind, but only if we have the courage to let go and trust in what we cannot yet see. If these words resonate with your inner journey or stir up something deeper within you, I encourage you to reflect and share your thoughts below. Like, comment, and stay with us as we explore more of what it means to seek, to find, and to truly live in the light of God's love. Can I get a shout of praise from you? Have you ever felt that life's journey is like a complex tapestry, where every thread, whether of joy or pain, weaves into something we barely comprehend? C.S. Lewis often explored this struggle between innocence and the harshness of maturity. He remarked, "A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest, suggesting that true wisdom transcends age. When we grow, we learn that God's plan is intricate, sometimes painful. We might not doubt that God desires the best for us, but we grapple with how deep the valleys may go before we see the mountain's peak." Think about those moments when the silence of inner pain feels heavier than words. Lewis poignantly observes that while those who speak about one's miseries usually hurt, those who keep silent hurt more. How often do we choose to stay silent, fearing that our suffering may seem too heavy for others to carry? Mental anguish doesn't bruise visibly like physical pain, but it carves deeper wounds. It becomes a hidden struggle, veiled behind forced smiles and nods of reassurance. And so, isn't it easier to say, "I'm tired," than to whisper, "I feel like I'm falling apart"? Lewis's insight reminds us that vulnerability in our struggles is not weakness, it is a bridge to deeper connection and healing. But why does the best path for us often come through trials? The Christian belief, as Lewis emphasizes, is not that God will love us because we have managed to perfect ourselves, but that God will make us good because He loves us. Our journey with God is not about earning His favor but being transformed by His love. What if the very struggles we face are shaping us into who we are meant to become? Could it be that, through the pain, we find God's profound peace and happiness, a peace not born of circumstances, but of being near to Him? Reflecting on what it means to grow up, Lewis critiques the notion of adulthood as a badge of superiority. He warns against treating adult as a term of approval, suggesting that a preoccupation with seeming grown up is itself a sign of immaturity. Why do we chase after the perception of adulthood, fearing any association with childlikeness? To grow is natural, but to lose the wonder and honesty of a child's heart is to miss a profound truth. Unless you change and become like little children. As Jesus says, "You will never enter the kingdom of heaven," Matthew 18, verse 3. There's beauty in carrying childlike faith into every season of life, a faith that is honest, open, and willing to trust beyond understanding. So, in your silence, in your growth, in the pain and joy of your journey, remember that God is ever present, weaving your story with threads of grace, truth, and a love that transforms. Isn't it curious how time shapes our view of the world? When we are children, we cling to stories of wonder, magic, and innocence, yet as we grow, society pushes us to let go of what they call childish. But what does it mean to be grown up? C.S. Lewis, the great Christian thinker, once shared how, as a child, he secretly enjoyed fairy tales but felt shame in his enjoyment. Yet, as he matured, he reclaimed that joy without embarrassment, realizing that true maturity is not about rejecting the simple joys of life, but understanding them in a deeper way. Have we, too, dismissed the beauty of simple things in our pursuit of appearing adult? Lewis's insight that putting away childish things means discarding the fear of being seen as childlike speaks to the heart of our struggles with identity and self-worth. How often do we allow the world's expectations to mold our desires, feeling the need to appear wise and grown up, forsaking what truly delights us? If we are honest, haven't we all, at some point, buried our true selves under layers of maturity? Lewis challenges us to view love not as soft sentimentality but as something more rigorous and splendid than mere kindness, a love that transforms and shapes, that is full of truth and courage. In a world that celebrates comfort and avoids discomfort, how many of us search for truth, even when it is hard to swallow? Education without values, he points out, is like arming a clever devil. Knowledge without the grounding of virtue leads us astray. And what of perspective? What we see and hear is so deeply influenced by our vantage point in life. How different does the world appear when we stand in the shoes of another? Lewis believed that to find truth, we must sometimes bypass our immediate comforts and dig deeper into life's realities. To cry is natural, to lament life's injustices is human. But after the tears, after the emotions subside, there is a choice to be made, a choice to seek something greater than just self-soothing. Lewis's own journey from doubt to faith reminds us that our deepest arguments against God often stem from our understanding of justice and injustice. But where does our concept of fairness come from? If we say that something is unjust, do we not have some idea of what just truly is? When Lewis wrestled with the perceived cruelty of the universe, he realized that his argument fell apart without acknowledging a moral standard, a straight line against which the crookedness of life is measured. How often do we, like him, find ourselves arguing against the very standard that points us back to God? If we are willing to face these questions with courage, perhaps we will find that, even in our doubts, there lies the hope of greater understanding and deeper faith. The human soul often finds itself yearning for something deeper, something unfulfilled by the world's passing pleasures. Have you ever felt an ache for something beyond your reach, as if the world could not quite quench a thirst hidden deep within? This longing, as C.S. Lewis profoundly observed, suggests a reality beyond our earthly existence. If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. These moments of longing and dissatisfaction aren't meaningless, they echo the eternal, pointing toward a home beyond the temporal. Life, much like a book, unfolds chapter by chapter, and each page we turn brings both the familiar and the unexpected. Think of the simple joys of life, reading a beloved book, sharing a meal with friends. These pleasures blend seamlessly, yet each new experience is different, for, as Lewis notes, things never happen the same way twice. So, while circumstances may shift like the tides, there's an anchor that remains constant: God's unwavering love. Feelings may be fleeting, coming and going like shadows on a cloudy day, but God's love does not waver. Do you struggle to accept this love, to forgive yourself as God forgives? Lewis challenges us: if God forgives us, we must forgive ourselves. Otherwise, we make ourselves a higher judge than Him. How often do we let shame and guilt speak louder than God's grace? Imagine, then, your life as a house, a structure built to shelter, protect, and hold memories. When God comes in, His intention is to transform this house into something greater than you imagined. At first, you may think He's only fixing the obvious flaws, repairing a leak here, mending a wall there. But soon, the work becomes uncomfortable, disruptive, even. There's knocking, hammering, rebuilding that feels like chaos. What is He doing? And why does it hurt so much? The answer, Lewis suggests, is that God is creating something grander. He's not simply patching up a modest cottage, He's crafting a palace fit for His dwelling. Can you trust the process, even when it feels unbearable? When His vision is beyond your own understanding? When faced with the idea of a universe devoid of meaning, atheism might seem a simple conclusion. But if the universe truly had no purpose, how could we ever recognize its lack of meaning? Lewis argues that the very ability to question purpose suggests that meaning exists. In the same way, originality is not the goal itself, truth is. In telling the truth about life, faith, and the struggles we face, we inadvertently discover something uniquely authentic. As Lewis wisely points out, if you aim for truth and not originality, the latter will follow naturally. So ask yourself, what palace is God building within you? And can you embrace the uncomfortable grace of transformation, knowing that it leads to a divine purpose far beyond what you can now see? Your life may feel like a house under endless construction, but the architect has a far greater vision, one that speaks of eternity, truth, and a love that never fades. Courage. Dear heart, C.S. Lewis once wrote, offering a whisper of hope amid life's fiercest storms. Have you ever found yourself standing at the crossroads of doubt and despair, unsure of which path to take? Pain demands attention. It cries out to be seen, heard, and understood. In these moments, God is not silent. He uses our suffering as a megaphone, reaching into the depths of our hearts. Lewis wisely states, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. Is it possible that your struggle is His voice breaking through the noise, calling you to awaken to His presence? We often search for words to give voice to our trials, but how easily do we stumble over phrases too grand or small? Lewis warns against using words too big for the subject, cautioning us to preserve the significance of the infinite. Consider this: how often do we miss the grandeur of the divine because we lack the language to describe it? Miracles, he says, are like small letters retelling the vast narrative of God's love, an epic written across the universe, yet sometimes hidden from those who cannot see. Could it be that the simple moments in life, the ones we often overlook, carry echoes of the miraculous? As each moment ticks forward, the future unfolds evenly for all, minute by minute, hour by hour. Yet, our understanding of time and belief often remains clouded until a pivotal moment makes it all too real. Have you ever faced a trial so intense that it tested the very foundation of what you believe? Lewis notes that we never truly know the strength of our faith until it becomes a matter of life or death. But remember, rejecting God does not diminish His glory. It's as futile as trying to blot out the sun by writing darkness on the walls of a prison cell. The love of Christ is not broad but deeply personal. He did not die for all humanity as a faceless mass, but for each man. If you were the only one, He would have gone to the cross for you alone. That is the measure of God's love, intimately infinite. And the truths we find in our youth are not fleeting. They grow richer with age, revealing new depths. For as Lewis says, no book is really worth reading at the age of 10 which is not equally worth reading at 50. Perhaps our own lives are like those books, filled with truths waiting to be rediscovered. So, how do we nurture growth in the barren places of our soul? Lewis encourages educators to irrigate deserts, not cut down jungles. This metaphor speaks not only to teaching but also to spiritual life. Are we cultivating growth, or merely hacking away at the surface of our struggles? In this journey of faith, let us dig deep, quench the thirst of our hearts, and find courage, dear heart, to walk the path set before us with unwavering hope. To have faith in Christ is not merely to acknowledge His teachings, but to allow those teachings to transform the very fabric of your being. What does it mean to truly trust in Him? Trust goes beyond mere belief. It's the act of surrendering your will to God's hands, to move through life in the light of His guidance, not out of duty or fear, but out of a love that has taken root within you. C.S. Lewis described faith as more than intellectual assent. It is an obedience that springs from a changed heart. Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods, he once wrote. Imagine walking a path lit, not by the world's flickering lights, but by the steady flame of God's presence. When you allow God to shape your life, you act not to earn His favor, but because His grace is already at work within you, a small glimmer of heaven transforming your actions, thoughts, and desires. Yet, there is a struggle that arises from this deep trust, a confrontation with fear, pain, and discomfort. Have you ever felt grief that disguises itself as fear, leaving you disoriented and questioning your very faith? C.S. Lewis himself once confessed, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. It's not about seeking comfort or a superficial happiness. Christianity demands a deeper, more profound joy that often emerges from embracing suffering and uncertainty. A bottle of port may drown sorrows temporarily, but Christ calls us to face the sorrows head-on, trusting that He is with us through every trial. Are you willing to step into that discomfort, knowing that the path to transformation often wins through valleys of pain? The journey of faith is not about seeking easy answers, but trusting that God Himself is the answer. When Lewis said, "I know now, Lord, why you utter no answer. You are yourself the answer," he pointed to the profound truth that God's presence satisfies more deeply than any fleeting response could. What questions do you hold in your heart, hoping for clarity, when perhaps God is inviting you to simply rest in His presence? Just as the lion called to Eustace in the Chronicles of Narnia, perhaps God is already calling to you, not just to give you what you desire, but to transform who you are. And when one blessing is taken away, can you trust that another is being prepared, even if you can't yet see it? As Lewis reminds us, when we lose one blessing, another is often most unexpectedly given in its place. Perhaps your faith journey is not about collecting blessings, but about becoming more attuned to the whisper of God's voice and the quiet, steady unfolding of His grace. Temptation is not a foreign concept to those who pursue goodness. In fact, it is those who actively strive to resist it who come to know its true strength. As C.S. Lewis insightfully puts it, no man knows how bad he is till he has tried very hard to be good. To struggle against temptation is to confront the powerful force it wields over human nature. But if one gives in easily, how can they understand the true intensity of the battle? A person who submits to their weaknesses after a brief struggle never discovers the immense endurance required to resist for longer. And isn't that what makes overcoming temptation such a powerful act of growth, one that teaches us not just about evil, but about the profound depth of our strength and will? Lewis goes further to highlight the paradox of pride. The proud heart is always looking down upon others, and in doing so, fails to see what lies above. As long as one's gaze is fixated downward, focused on their own superiority or self-perceived righteousness, they are blind to the greater truth and grace that is God. Pride, then, is not merely a character flaw, but a hindrance to seeing the divine perspective, obscuring the reality of one's own brokenness and need for God's mercy. It asks the pressing question, how often have we let our pride obscure our view of the grace above us? Lewis also sheds light on the nature of God's presence in our struggles and imperfections. It is when we notice the dirt that God is most present in us. It is the very sign of His presence. How often do we, in the midst of our temptations and failures, feel farthest from God when it may be that He is nearer than ever? It's in those moments of struggle, when we confront the darkness within us, that we realize God's transformative power. He doesn't shy away from our mess, but meets us right in the midst of it. Yet, embracing God is not the safe path. The journey with Him is not a promise of comfort. As Lewis writes in the Chronicles of Narnia, course He isn't safe. But He's good. Following God requires courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to be broken and remade. The path of faith will hurt, for to love God deeply is to open oneself to the raw, and refining work of his hands. Still, isn't it worth it to pursue a goodness that shapes our very souls, that moves us toward the adventure of a lifetime? The choice is yours. You can live a life wondering what might have been, avoiding risk and adventure, or, as Lewis challenges, make your choice. Adventurous strangers strike the bell and bide the danger. Christianity is not a half-hearted journey, it's a radical choice between all or nothing. If false, it is of no value, but if true, it's everything. So, the question remains, will you confront your temptations, embrace the struggle, and keep your eyes lifted upward to see the glory above? Imagine the simple joy of discovering something new each day, akin to picking up a book on a rainy afternoon and feeling the anticipation of opening an unknown story. C.S. Lewis captures this sentiment in his works, showing how life, like literature, is an endless quest for meaning and connection. How often do we walk through our lives, filled with distractions, failing to notice the presence of God everywhere? In the Chronicles of Narnia, Lewis illustrates that the divine often walks incognito, and we are surrounded by the whispers of God, woven into the fabric of our daily experiences. Have you ever considered that every ordinary moment carries within it an extraordinary invitation to know God more intimately? In The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, when Lucy counters Edmund's comment about not remembering maps, it's not merely humor, it's a deeper truth about perception and faith. Our minds are filled not just with directions, but with wonder, longing, and a desire for a true home. For Lewis, this longing is like a beacon, pointing toward a greater reality, a place where all the beauty comes from, a homeland that feels not like a destination but a return to where we were always meant to be. How many of us carry this deep yearning for home, a spiritual destination, even if we can't fully articulate what it means? Relying on God is not a one-time event but a daily commitment, a continuous turning toward Him in every moment of weakness and strength. Lewis warns against reducing Christ to a mere moral teacher, as this overlooks His divine nature. He asserts in Mere Christianity that Jesus is either the Son of God or something far worse. There is no middle ground. It's a stark choice that demands reflection. Have you ever wrestled with this decision, to see Jesus as merely a guide, or to accept Him as Lord? It is a choice that shapes every moment and decision of our lives. Adventures, much like spiritual journeys, often don't feel like thrilling escapades while we're living through them. They are uncomfortable, confusing, and sometimes deeply painful. Yet it is through these trials that virtues like courage are formed, as Lewis suggests, at the testing point of every virtue. When we turn to God in these moments, we find that our authentic selves emerge, not because we are becoming something new, but because we are becoming who we were always meant to be. How often do we resist letting God take over, fearing the loss of our individuality, when in fact, surrendering to Him is the beginning of discovering our truest selves? "You come of the Lord Adam and the Lady Eve," Aslan once said, echoing both honor and humility. This dual nature of being both uplifted and bowed in reverence reflects our human experience, honored in our creation, yet humbled in our brokenness. Lewis reminds us that suffering was part of the promise, not a detour but the path itself. Blessed are those who mourn, for in their mourning they discover a deeper truth. How do we face our sufferings, and with bitterness, or with the courage to believe that they are shaping us into the likeness of Christ? In the end, searching for oneself without seeking Christ leads to emptiness, a cycle of despair, rage, and decay. Yet when we look for Christ, we find everything else included, even ourselves. This paradox of finding our personality by losing it in Christ is the crux of Lewis's belief. Every day, we are called to turn towards Him, to let go of our masks, and to find the courage to dare greatly, embracing the unknown adventures that life, faith, and God offer. For in the midst of our trials, He walks with us, even if at times incognito, waiting for us to see Him in all things. Have you ever wondered what it means to truly find yourself? C.S. Lewis offers a paradox that beckons us to surrender. Give up yourself, and you will find your real self. It sounds like a contradiction. To gain, you must lose. To find, you must relinquish. What ambitions, desires, or dreams do you hold so tightly that they may be keeping you from discovering who you are meant to be? Lewis writes that our real identity emerges not by holding on, but by letting go, by submitting to what feels like a loss, but is in reality a greater gain. It's a daily laying down of self, dying to fleeting passions and dreams, and in the end, facing the ultimate death of our own bodies. But this submission is not an empty act, it is the doorway to eternal life, where our true nature is revealed. Lewis often spoke of a secret thread that binds together the things we deeply love, yet cannot quite name. He illustrates this beautifully in his depiction of Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, the true lion, whose paws both protect and challenge us. Are there threads in your life that you feel pulled by but struggle to name or understand? These are not chains but connections woven by the artist, guiding us through both the struggles and the comforts. And yet, we must not confuse the necessary hardships of life with goodness itself. Pain is often the path to growth, but it is not the destination. We are often tempted to wait for the right time to act, but Lewis warns against this distraction. Favorable conditions never truly arrive. Do we delay our deeper calling, waiting for circumstances to change, or for life to finally make sense? Lewis challenges us to move despite the chaos to be seekers of truth and knowledge, even when storms rage. For we are not the painter, only the canvas, and we cannot see the full picture of our lives. He paints, we submit. Can you trust this process, even when you cannot see the end result? The act of surrender is not passive, it involves fulfilling your role with diligence and humility, acknowledging failures, seeking forgiveness, and then leaving those failures behind. Do not constantly inspect the path beneath your feet, walk forward in trust. Lewis reminds us that faith is not about seeing the entire journey, but about believing in the one who leads it. Literature adds to reality, Lewis once said, for it does not merely describe life but enriches it, providing meaning and depth to our experiences. How does your story connect with the larger narrative of faith and purpose? Progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's recognizing when to turn back, to admit a wrong step, and to choose a new direction. True progress, then, is not about stubbornly moving forward, but about knowing when to return to the right road. In this, there is courage and hope, and in this, the path of true transformation. To resist God is like struggling against the source of your very breath. Imagine cutting the branch beneath you. How could you remain standing? C.S. Lewis once said that reality, in fact, is usually something you could not have guessed. For faith is like that, full of unexpected truths and unsettling grace. Christianity's authenticity isn't found in being the religion we want, but in revealing the depth of the world we often miss. Are we willing to accept a reality that challenges our comforts, something not easily manufactured? Consider, for a moment, the vastness of God's reality, so peculiar, so untamed, that it could not have been invented by any human imagination. This perspective calls for humility, which counters pride, the very vice that thrives not on the joy of possession but on comparison. Lewis remarks, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. The moment we see ourselves without the lenses of competition, pride vanishes. When you strip away those comparisons, what's left? A soul yearning to align with God, a soul shaped uniquely to fit the contours of the divine. Picture a key and a lock, they're meaningless apart, but perfect together. Lewis reminds us that your soul is like a key crafted precisely to fit a particular space in the vast house of God's dwelling. Every part of you, every thread of your being, has been woven with intention, stitch by stitch, to fit perfectly into God's kingdom. But how often do we find ourselves lost, longing to return to that place where we feel at home? Lewis himself admits, the sweetest thing in all my life has been the longing to find the place where all the beauty came from. Isn't that the essence of our spiritual journey? A quest for that eternal beauty, for a home we've never fully known. Gratitude looks back, love embraces the present, but fear, lust, and ambition peer anxiously into an unknown future. And when we lose someone dear, it feels like a part of our soul has been amputated. How do we reconcile this? Lewis suggests that even in our pain, there's a hidden teacher experience, that most brutal of teachers. But you learn, my God, do you learn? Yet when we feel most disconnected or broken, it is often when God is closest, offering solace not as a convenience, but as a transformative presence. Faith is not a shortcut to answers or a tool for self-gain. It's the staircase we climb, not to reach the nearest solution, but to enter the divine mystery. When we look at our lives, like the adventures in Narnia, we find that our earthly story is just the cover and title page. Beyond this life, there is chapter 1 of a great story, a never-ending tale, where each chapter is better than the one before. Do we have the courage to step into that story, trusting that it holds something beyond our imagination? Forgiveness, so sweet to speak of, becomes daunting when it demands our hearts to heal real wounds. Yet, there is the promise that one day wrong will be right. When Aslan comes in sight, this is hope in its purest form, a hope that defies despair. Aslan's roar brings an end to sorrow, his mane shaking brings a spring that melts away winter's hold. What does it mean for you, personally, to let go, to forgive, and to hold on to faith in the midst of shifting moods and fears? Faith, says Lewis, is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods. In the end, courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about doing what is right despite trembling hands. As Peter faced his fears, feeling as if he might be sick, he still pressed on. Can you, like him, step forward despite the fear, trusting that every step brings you closer to the story God is writing for you? There was a time when I thought the concept of separating the sinner from the sin was splitting hairs. How could one detest a man's actions without detesting the man himself? But with time, I realized that I had, unknowingly, practiced this very principle all my life with myself. My own failings, my greed, my selfishness, and cowardice never led me to hate myself. Rather, it was my love for myself that made me despise those actions. It struck me as odd at first, how could love and disgust coexist within the same heart? But C.S. Lewis's insight into the human condition illuminated this paradox. We detest our sin because we wish to be more than our brokenness. We long for growth, transformation, to be hatched and not remain forever eggs, stunted and undeveloped. Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is different? Lewis's words speak to the quiet transformation we all undergo, often without realizing it. Have you ever found yourself looking back on your life, seeing the gap between who you were and who you've become? That is grace at work, the tension between self-love and self-correction leading to gradual, often unnoticed, metamorphosis. And here lies the question: how often do we grant others the same grace? To love them not for what they are now, but for what they are becoming? To act as if you love your neighbor is more than pretending it is participating in a divine narrative where love leads and actions follow. When you reach out to someone, even when it feels like there's no affection in your heart, something remarkable happens. Love grows. Love is not always an overwhelming emotion. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to see someone not for what they are, but for what they can be. Have you ever acted with love when your feelings told you otherwise, only to find that over time, genuine affection sprouted from the act itself? Friendship, in Lewis's perspective, is born when two souls find themselves united in a shared truth. This is why we seek out those who see the world as we do not, because we want an echo chamber, but because true friendship draws us closer to the light of truth, together. And what is the essence of these friendships? Not just shared pleasures, but shared purpose. To see the truth together is the foundation of fellowship. Otherwise, there is nothing to unite souls, no deeper connection beyond mere company. Reflect on this. Have you ever felt most alive when in the company of those who share not just your interests, but your deepest beliefs? We live in a world that cries out for true companionship, a place where you are known and cherished, not just as you are, but as you are becoming. Lewis once said, "The very condition of having friends is that we should want something else besides friends." Friendship isn't an end in itself, it's the shared pursuit of a higher truth, a journey towards God, towards goodness, towards purpose. And so, as we build relationships, may they be ones where iron sharpens iron, where we look not just to love but to lead each other towards the light. And perhaps, in those moments of shared truth and vulnerability, we may finally understand what it means to love the sinner and not the sin, starting with ourselves. Friendship, in its truest form, is a revelation of the soul, where each person stands both exalted and humbled by the presence of another. C.S. Lewis once reflected that in such relationships, one often wonders how they came to belong among these peers, feeling that they are part of something greater than themselves, as if they are undeserving guests at a feast of minds and hearts. When friends gather, they don't simply exist beside one another, they bring out the best, wisest, and even the most humorous qualities in each other, forming a mosaic of shared humanity. This sense of awe and connection creates a space where one sees not only the light in their own life, but also the reflection of that light magnified in the presence of others. Is it not in those moments of joy and connection that we find ourselves most vulnerable? And yet, it is precisely this vulnerability that forms the foundation of deep friendship. Lewis described how affection makes up much of our happiness, emphasizing that friendship has a unique way of unveiling our personalities. Where eros seeks intimacy of the body, friendship seeks intimacy of the soul, naked personalities laid bare, sharing in a common vision, drawn to each other like stars in an immense solitude. Have you ever felt that instant connection, the spark of recognition when someone says, "You too? I thought I was the only one"? It's in that recognition, that unveiling of shared struggles, hopes, and dreams, that friendship is born. Interestingly, true friendship is the least possessive of loves. It does not cling or grasp, but delights in bringing others into the fold, much like the blessed souls in Dante's Divine Comedy who welcome each newcomer as one who will augment our loves. In this, there is a divine paradox. Friendship is multiplied when shared. Unlike any other bond, friends stand side by side, absorbed in a shared interest, rather than face to face as lovers do. They are not captivated by their connection alone, but by the higher purpose or idea they pursue together. And then there is the mystery of providence, the hidden hand of God weaving lives together. Lewis remarked that what appears as chance, the year we were born, the place we live, a conversation at a social gathering, is, for the Christian, the work of a divine master of ceremonies. Christ's words to his disciples, "Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you," extend to our friendships as well. Have you ever considered that those who journey alongside you may not be mere coincidences but divine appointments? That every genuine friend is placed in your life not as a product of your good taste or wise choice, but as an instrument through which God reveals more of His grace? Friendship, like philosophy or art, may not be necessary for survival, but it is one of those sacred things that gives meaning to life. To engage in friendship is to be vulnerable, to expose one's inner self, and in doing so, to find a mirror reflecting back the beauty that God has instilled within each of us. And so, the journey of friendship continues, two souls walking together, side by side, discovering in each other the unseen wonders that only such a bond can reveal.